The Black Death, the deadliest pandemic in human history, wiped out nearly half of Europe's population in the 14th century. But its story isn't just about death. Today, we'll explore how the Black Death reshaped Europe, from collapsing economies to new social structures and even the birth of modern science and art. Let's uncover the world left behind after the plague. The Black Death arrived in Europe in 1347, likely via trading ships from Asia carrying infected rats and fleas. Over the next 5 years, it would kill an estimated 25 to 50 million people, nearly 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe's population. Symptoms were horrifying: blackened buboes, vomiting blood, and death within days. Entire villages vanished. Fear and superstition ran rampant, with people blaming everything from divine wrath to minority groups like Jews, leading to horrific violence. The Black Death is widely believed to have been the result of plague, caused by infection with the bacterium Yersinia pestis. Modern genetic analyses indicate that the strain of Y. pestis introduced during the Black Death is ancestral to all extant circulating Y. pestis strains known to cause disease in humans. Hence, the origin of modern plague epidemics lies in the medieval period. Other scientific evidence has indicated that the Black Death may have been viral in origin. Having originated in China and Inner Asia, the Black Death decimated the army of the Kipchak Khan Janibeg while he was besieging the Genoese trading port of Kaffa, now Feudalism, in Crimea, 1347. With his forces disintegrating, Janibeg used trebuchets to catapult plague-infested corpses into the town in an effort to infect his enemies. From Kaffa, Genoese ships carried the epidemic westward to Mediterranean ports, whence it spread inland, affecting Sicily, 1347, North Africa, mainland Italy, Spain, and France, 1348, and Austria, Hungary, Switzerland, Germany, and the Low Countries, 1349. A ship from Calais carried the plague to Melcombe Regis, Dorset, in August 1348. It reached Bristol almost immediately and spread rapidly throughout the southwestern counties of England. London suffered most violently between February and May 1349, East Anglia and Yorkshire during that summer. The Black Death reached the extreme north of England, Scotland, Scandinavia, and the Baltic countries in 1350. As the plague raged on, and all efforts to stop its spread or cure those infected failed, people began to lose faith in the institutions they had relied on previously, while the social system of feudalism began to crumble due to the widespread death of the serfs. Those who were most susceptible as their living conditions placed them in closer contact with each other on a daily basis than those of the upper classes. The plague ran rampant among the lower class who sought shelter and assistance from friaries, churches, and monasteries, spreading the plague to the clergy, and from the clergy it spread to the nobility. By the time the disease had run its course in 1352, millions were dead, and the social structure of Europe was as unrecognizable as much of the landscape since, as Cantor notes, many flourishing cities became virtual ghost towns for a time, civilization 482, and crops lay rotting in the fields with no one to harvest them. Before the plague, the king was thought to own all the land which he allocated to his nobles. The nobles had serfs work the land, which turned a profit for the lord, who paid a percentage to the king. The serfs themselves earned nothing for their labor, except lodging and food they grew themselves. Since all land was the king's, he felt free to give it as gifts to friends, relatives, and other nobility who had been of service to him, and so every available piece of land by c. 1347 was being cultivated by serfs under one of these lords. With so many dead, Europe's feudal economy collapsed. Labor shortages gave surviving peasants bargaining power for the first time. Wages rose. Lords desperate for workers had to grant better terms. Serfdom, the backbone of medieval society, began to erode. Landowners shifted toward more profitable farming and wool production, laying early groundwork for capitalism. Cities recovered faster than rural areas, accelerating urbanization. It was not only the higher wages demanded by the peasant class, nor a preoccupation with death that affected post-plague architecture, however, but the vast reduction in agricultural production and demand due to depopulation, which led to an economic recession. Fields were left uncultivated, and crops were allowed to rot, while at the same time nations severely limited imports in an effort to control the spread of the plague, which only worsened their economies as well as those of their former trading partners. The widespread fear of a death one had not earned, could not see coming, and could not escape, stunned the population of Europe at the time, and, once they had somewhat recovered, inspired them to rethink the way they were living previously and the kinds of values they had held. Although little changed initially, by the middle of the 15th century radical changes, unimaginable only 100 years before, were taking place throughout Europe. notably the Protestant Reformation, the agricultural shift from large-scale grain farming to animal husbandry, the wage increase for urban and rural laborers, and the many other advances associated with the Renaissance. Plague outbreaks would continue long after the Black Death pandemic of the 14th century, but none would have the same psychological impact, resulting in a complete reevaluation of the existing paradigm of received knowledge. Europe, as well as other regions, based its reactions to the Black Death on traditional conventions, whether religious or secular, and when these failed, new models for understanding the world had to be created. As the plague wore on, however, depopulation greatly reduced the workforce, and the serf's labor suddenly became an important and increasingly rare asset. The lord of an estate could not feed himself, his family, or pay tithes to the king or the church without the labor of his peasants, and the loss of so many meant that survivors could now negotiate for pay and better treatment. The lives of the members of the lowest class vastly improved as they were able to afford better living conditions and clothing as well as luxury items. Once the plague had passed, the improved lot of the serf was challenged by the upper class, who were concerned that the lower classes were forgetting their place. Fashion changed dramatically as the elite demanded more extravagant clothing and accessories to distance themselves from the poor, who could now afford to dress more finely than in their previous rags and blankets. Efforts of the wealthy to return the serf to his previous condition resulted in uprisings such as the Peasant Revolt in France in 1358, the Guild Revolts of 1378, the famous Peasants' Revolt of London in 1381. There was no turning back, however, and the efforts of the elite were futile. Class struggle would continue, but the authority of the feudal system was broken. The Black Death didn't just kill bodies, it shattered old hierarchies. Survivors demanded better treatment, and when denied, peasants revolted. In England's Peasants' Revolt of 1381, mobs stormed London demanding lower taxes and an end to feudal obligations. Though the revolt was crushed, the old order was permanently weakened. Social mobility increased. Freed from rigid structures, talented individuals rose to power in cities and trades that once seemed unattainable. The psychological impact of the plague was profound. Death became an obsession. Artworks depicted the Danse Macabre, a grim dance of life and death, reminding viewers of mortality. At the same time, religious faith was shaken. Many questioned the authority of the Catholic Church, setting the stage for later movements like the Reformation. Paradoxically, this trauma also fueled innovation and creativity. The Renaissance, with its focus on humanism and secular learning, blossomed in the century following the plague's devastation. The Black Death forced Europe to rethink everything, from science to economics to governance. Medical practices slowly shifted away from superstition toward early scientific inquiry. Universities grew in importance, and literacy rates began rising. The feudal world of 1300 was gone by 1500, replaced by nation-states, urban centers, and a more questioning, ambitious society. The Black Death was a tragedy beyond imagination, but from its ashes rose a new Europe, freer, more dynamic, and on the path to modernity. If you found this hidden side of history fascinating, be sure to like, subscribe, and tap the bell for more deep dives. And tell us in the comments, what other forgotten events should we uncover next?